Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call the Sumter County Council Budget Workshop for Tuesday, June 9th. Order.
Let us bow. Heavenly Father, thank you, God, for all the goodness that you've already given us. Allow us to be appreciative and thankful for all the good that you do. Lord, as we go into this meeting, please guide the minds and hearts of those that are working for the citizens in this county. And then allow council members to do the things that they need to do to continue to make this a better place to live, learn, work, play, and worship. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Do we have any changes to the agenda?
No, sir.
Okay. Have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion approved, second.
It's been moved and properly seconded that we approve the agenda. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The agenda is approved. First item on the new business is presentation by our school district.
Mr. Chairman, before I leave the chamber, I would just like to make a brief statement. Today, I watched the film services of George Floyd and was pretty sad and upset. And I watched the demonstrations throughout the week and saw the abuse of military personnel in which honor retiree veterans. But I also heard the words that were being constantly spoken, and that is about systemic racism and the fact that there are racism and funding in our educational system. When we began to look at the presentation tonight, I would want us as a council to look at who is in our school system, who are the students. They're majority black and majority low income of all races. Who are the people who are receiving or not paying taxes to support them? They are majority white and higher income. The funds that they're not receiving are entitled to them under South Carolina Act 388, which is the law. But because school does not have fiscal autonomy, they have to come through this body to get approval. And I just want to ask ourselves, are we practicing systemic racism? And also, is the Sumter County delegation, who has the authority and power to give the school district fiscal autonomy like most progressive school districts in the state have, are they complicit in this systemic racism? With that, Mr. Chairman, I will leave. But let me depart with one thing. Please don't give me the excuse that we have a member who's black who voted against the schools, because we've always had our Kanye Wests and Candace Owens in our midst. Thank you.
So good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I first and foremost like to take this opportunity to personally and professionally thank you for the opportunity to present with you. It was almost a year ago that I sat in this audience and when I first met you all and watched the budget as it was presented on behalf of Sumter School District. So today, I come to you just to speak to you about the needs of the school district and as we continue to move our school district forward to meet not only the needs of our children, but the needs of our greater Sumter community as well. So thank you again for the opportunity to present. This afternoon, myself, along with Ms. Jennifer Miller, who's our Chief Financial Officer for Sumter School District, will be sharing in the delivery of the content as it pertains to this presentation. You need me to speak in here? So as you can see on the screen displayed before you, it is our mission of Sumter School District to equip students to be responsible, successful, and productive citizens in a global society. And as we look at our society as a whole, as we are graduating our students, it is most important that we are equipping them with the tools so that they can compete. So once and for all, they can come back and contribute to our community so that we can continue to grow and to be the best school district and community there is to offer. To begin this particular school year, there were 3 goals that have been established. And these goals were established first and foremost by taking the opportunity to step back, listen, and learn. Looking at the data, watching the community, observing what the needs are before we can formulate goals. And there are 3 goals that we've been governed by this particular school year. First and foremost, you will always hear me speak about academic achievement. Academic achievement is what we focus on each and every day for every child. From the time they step foot into kindergarten until the time they exit as their senior year. But even more importantly, how we benefited them as they again become productive citizens in our society. When we look at academic achievement, the premise that we've been operating by is that each school should not have an isolated program or process in which we educate children, but as a school district, we must educate all of our children in an equitable manner to ensure there are no gaps that will continue to exist when we look at performance data. The second goal that we focused on is school climate and culture. Every child who comes into our school must feel welcome, they must feel invited. And so while we're looking at the climate that exists in our nation today, this stands true so much more today than it did in the beginning of the year when we established this actual goal and the criteria by which we support it. And the third goal is the operations and management of our school. While all the other components are important, understand that this is the foundation. Goal number 3 is the foundation by which we can implement and operate effectively. And within the operations and the management, I have vowed as the superintendent of Sumter School District and proudly will say to you that we will continue to operate being financially responsible and whatever it is that we need to do to meet the needs of our children. One of the things that we've done this year so far is operated with an either-or mindset while trying to accommodate and meet the needs of goals number 1 and 2. We should not have to operate with an either-or. It should not be an option. We should make sure that we are elevating all of the supports we put in place for our children, regardless as to the financial. One of my superintendents once told me the financial piece should not dictate what a child receives. And so what we've been doing this year is just operating with that premise, making sure we are putting in place what a child needs versus what we can possibly get away with not having. But we should not be doing that, and we're planning to educate our children to be competitive in a global society. When we look at school expenditures in the budget, one of the things that I've learned through my planning and my growth as a leader is that the school budget is really operated with, the school district operates with 90% of its budget going to salaries and benefits. As you can see, the graph, the green piece is the pie chart that actually shows how much is usually spent on salaries and employee benefits. If you look at the next largest piece of this graph, the other is the purchase services. These are the monies that we use to invest in our children that are actually supporting the curriculum that students must receive. The other piece is the 5% for supplies, materials, and our utilities. These are the operational pieces. And again, we vow to make sure that we've been financially responsible in this particular area. And the 1% is the other. When those matters arise, when federal guidelines change, this is the remaining percentage that we have to operate from in making sure that we are educating our children on a daily basis. Now, taking that percentage and putting numerical dollar signs behind it, if you look, $111 million are in our salaries and benefits for our staff. We have the remaining amount of $6.6 million to go into what we called, I spoke to you about before, which are our supplies, materials, and utilities. Another 4.6 goes into purchase services. This usually is your learning management systems, your purchase services as it pertains to additional supports and professional development. And then the remaining pieces, again, are that of which constitutes the supplies, which could be the technology pieces and the sources that feed, again, into the pipeline of our classroom in each of our schools. So the challenges that we face going in, there have been challenges, but again, they've been compounded by COVID-19 that snuck up on many of us. And this is not just a matter that we talk about here in Sumter. This is a national issue that we're facing, but I'm here to advocate on behalf of the children of Sumter School District. And so when we look at the major budget challenges, we recognize that there is an anticipated revenue reduction as a result of taxes and others who've lost their jobs and employment and unable to work as a result of the COVID-19. When we look at the other pieces in terms of the major budget challenges, the ability to offer instructional programs, because we're going to have to begin to cut. And I believe in making sure we invest in our people. And a few years ago, Sumter School District had to create a recovery plan so that we were able to bounce back from the deficit that we faced. And fortunately this year, Sumter School District is not under the auspice of being in financial crisis. However, we just hit the benchmark. So it's nothing for us to get happy over, to begin spending, because again, going back to that third goal of financial responsibility, we have to make sure that we're being responsible in our spending. The other thing that really challenges us is able to not just attract, but to attract and retain quality staff to educate our children. So the ability to offer cost of living increases to our employees. Our employees are working and they work diligently, but one of the things, again, that we face each and every day when we go into the building is trying to determine how we can retain those staff members that we have that are of quality, but continuing to attract as we lose teachers for the competitiveness with neighboring school districts who are offering bonuses to staff to sign on. At this particular point in time, we can't compete with that. The other piece is there will be mandates, federal and state, that we have to implement. And so those expenditures will give us major challenges as we're moving forward. I talked a little bit about the ability to hire appropriate staff. And then the final bullet, as you see before you, is the ability to support our workforce development. Everyone knows that it begins with education. And if our children aren't being educated, we can continue to spin our wheels and we will not be creating environments where our children, one, have the skill set and the ability, whether we're talking about soft skills or whether we're talking about mathematical comprehension or whether we're talking about just positive human skills, to be able to contribute to our workforce development. So we will always chase that target and that goal if we're not meeting the needs of the children that we are graduating.
Good evening. I'm going to talk a little bit about our budget unknowns for the upcoming year. One of the large increases that will be mandated is a teacher salary increase. We don't know what that end result is going to be, but what I can speak of is what the figure was before COVID-19 hit. There was a discussion about a $3,000 increase to the teacher scale. Every step would be up $3,000, plus your normal step increase as well. There was also a health insurance increase that would be 6.7% increase, and then a 1% mandatory retirement increase. Those numbers, offset by the funding that we would receive, would result in a $3.4 million local responsibility. So the school district would have to find $3.4 million for those mandated increases.
Can I stop you and ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
State was saying, they will put $3,000 in. So,
And then you have your
them
step
not doing
increase.
it, we're obligated to do it.
No, what I'm saying is they will pay for the $3,000, but then there is also a step increase. So each year a teacher that was a first-year teacher then becomes a second-year
You
teacher.
said all of those things you mentioned, total
That-
$3.4 million.
Less the amount, it's a higher number than that. The net number that we would have to pay for as a school district would be $3.4 million. Yes, the state will pay the $3,000, but there's a retirement increase that they do not cover, there's a health insurance increase they do not cover, and the step increase that they do not fully cover. So that's a
Just
$3.4
talking about
million.
steps, didn't we address that 4 years ago?
You
9
addressed,
mills?
you addressed a step.
And didn't we address the steps, and we took it up to 28 years, where you step up all the way up to 28 years, I believe. It was at 22 years, and then we addressed a salary increase, and it seemed like there was something else we addressed with that steps, which, I'm just wondering, so that wasn't enough to keep up with?
The way that works each year for a step, you did fund that step for that 1 year, but then the next year we had to do another step and that was not funded. So each year there is a step
Yeah, we
increase.
gave you 9 mills, so that 9 mills was continued on every year.
But that first step
Let's,
cost a certain dollar amount, which we had to pay again the next year, plus the next step. So it's a continuing increase. It continues to increase year after year.
But that's a choice. You don't have to give a step.
It is a mandate that we have to give a step
That's
increase.
not what I'm hearing from the state. So I think we need to clarify, the chairman of Ways and Means telling me something different.
So,
That's why I'm getting conflicting information here. That's all. I'm trying to find out what's going on.
and so when we talk about the competitiveness with other school districts, wherever you are, teachers get a step increase every year. Whether it's mandatory or not, I believe it's state governed in terms of whether you have to give it to them or not. Like the 3% Jennifer was talking about, that would be state mandated. But a step increase, we don't have to give them an increase, but they're expected to get an increase. And so that's probably where the language conflicts. And so if we're not keeping up with, again, our neighboring districts and giving those step increases, that's where we continue to fall behind and we begin to lose staff because they're going to go where they're going to get those incremental steps. And we haven't even talked about some of the bonuses that but every year there is a step increase. And there's some step increases that are mandated and there's some that are just
and at one time, the district was at 22 years for the step increase.
Say that part again.
I said, at one time, when I was teaching, you got steps all the way up to 22 years.
That would be correct. That's
And then Frank Baker came here and he told us that, well, he can't keep jobs because they're all going over to Kershaw, and we needed to increase the steps up to 28 years, which a teacher would get his steps all the way up to 28 years. I believe is the way it's set up now. And that's where I'm getting confused is we issued an additional 9 mills of millage to do that. So now you're telling me that 9 mills wasn't enough to do it?
It may have been.
Because I thought we were talking, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, I don't mean to cut you
But
off.
that's where I just got confused when you were saying, well, it's almost like we did it for that first year and now we don't have enough to do it for the following years. And I'm going, well, why do we give you 9 mills? Because that 9 mills always stays there. That's where I'm just confused at with the steps.
And so let me go into teacher mode. So every year, teachers get an increase and a step increase.
And I like it.
And at that particular point in time, it was appropriate. But if every year we're not able to go back to that because their salaries increase every year, we're still, whenever that last 9 mills were given, that's where they still are. They've not gotten an increase over those past.
They haven't got a salary increase,
They've not gotten salary
but
increases.
they have got the step increase.
They should have gotten
They
a
all
step.
get
Yeah, they got the step. And that's what my question was that my 9 mills is still going to their steps?
Absolutely.
Up
Yes.
to 28 years?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. And the other piece is, while we're giving teachers the step increase, our support staff hasn't received, because usually the mandate is for teaching staff and not the support staff. So they have not received. It's been, you can help me here, the last time.
2 years ago, they received
When you say
1%
support-
increase.
Who are
Yes.
exactly are we talking about?
Bus drivers, food services, paraprofessionals, secretaries, those persons, and thank you for asking the question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, sometimes I get into the teacher language and I forget.
That's right.
But that's what we're talking about. They're all important, and that's why we call them supports.
And I think that's what kind of rubbed me the wrong way last year was, you're doing a great job. 'Cause if you don't hear about it in the paper, I know you're doing a good
Thank you
job.
so much.
But last year, it just seemed like that they gave $850,000 worth of raises to people in the district office. And then they turn around and say they're gonna give a 1% raise to your support. which, that just rubbed me the wrong way. I said, that was like a slap in the face of that crowd. So, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I wish we could have used some of that money to help your support.
And so I stand before you today,
Yeah.
and I've said it, and I will publicly say it, the funding that we are asking for you to provide support is not for district staff, it's not for superintendent, it's not for chief of staff, it's not for executive office, it's for direct support to schools, because that's where the greatest need is right now. Are you ready?
And it's not for fund balance.
No, sir. It's for the support that our children need, and we'll get a little deeper into that. Thank you for the questions. And so the ability to provide you with clarification is why we're here. Because again, it's not about the chiefs, it's not about the executive staff, it's about school needs. Again, when I told you that I first came here, the first thing I did was listen. I sat down and I had conversations, and I asked Jennifer time and time again, when's the last time you heard about raise? When's the last time? How much was that? When? Why? Asking those questions before we begin to devise a needs plan. Because this isn't just about Penelope standing here asking for something. It's about a need. And so, again, I'm gonna, because I just hijacked her slide, so I'm gonna skip.
No, you were right on with it, the support. I approve of that.
All right. The next one is our final enrollment figures. We still need to work through those. What we have now does show an increase in students, so again, that will be a cost to the district, and we do not know what the state's going to do with funding per student. That is a big unknown at this point, so it's hard to project that figure. We know we're going to have COVID-19 revenue reductions. How much that will be, we're not sure. I've been informed to budget between 5 and 8%. That would be between $6 and $10 million for the school district in a revenue reduction for next year. There's also COVID-19 expenditures that we know we're going to face. How much? That's a big unknown. We are probably going to need additional custodian staff to keep our schools clean for our children. The disinfectants, the supplies, the masks, all of those type of things are an unknown expense at this time.
Where are the revenue reductions coming?
It'll come from the state revenue.
State?
That is the state revenue projection that we've been discussing.
And so just, again, excuse me. So that's why we call it the unknown, because we haven't received those figures, because everyone's in the state where we are because of COVID. It's hijacked everything that it is that we've been trying to do. And so, you know, with us not being able to project, one of the things that we did as a district, we halted spending, not knowing. And when we go back to that third goal of being financially responsible, we stopped spending only for those necessities. Of course, some things were naturally suspended, like the travel and professional development that was put on hold. But unless it's an absolute necessity at this particular point in time, schools have stopped spending. The district office has stopped spending in preparation for that 5 to 8% budget cut that we have to put in place. And when, okay. And so when the district created a recovery plan previously, they actually reduced less than what we will probably have to reduce at this particular point in time. And then again, just looking at the implications and knowing where we have to go, it was most prudent for us to say, unless you need it right here and right now, then it is not going to be approved for spending, because we have to plan to make sure we're able to continue the momentum and moving forward for the fall.
One quick, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The 5 to 8% reduction, that's unknown. And it's even unknown if it will be any reduction. We won't know until the fall when the state passes its budget. If county council were to give an increase in millage to the school district next week, that's permanent. And then if the state comes in the fall and you don't see the reduction, the council may have to consider doing this in the fall after we see what the state does.
And so again, I didn't want to wait and to be behind the 8 ball. For those of you who work with me, I'm just constantly looking forward, because we have one shot with children, and we can't miss that one shot. And so in my conversations with other superintendents around South Carolina and around the nation, and our state superintendent, knowing that there's going to be some sort of budget reduction, instead of waiting to the fall to say, okay, we have to reduce, we have to plan now, just to make sure we don't fall behind.
You got to plan the budget.
Yes, sir.
Base it on something.
Absolutely, yes, sir. So
It's an unknown.
Yes, sir. And that's why the title, budget unknowns. It's not something that we're saying budget requests, budget, it's the unknowns at this particular point.
Well, I read somewhere that the federal government sent down $1.9 billion to the state of South Carolina. Will y'all get a piece of that pie?
So we will. And what that is used for are the expenditures that occurred due to COVID. It is not for the planning and moving forward. Whatever the
So they
expenditures were.
are telling you how you gotta spend that money.
We have buckets that we can select from.
Okay.
So yes, if we had to pay for additional devices to do e-learning or online learning or what we call.
How about additional custodians or something like that? Would that?
It would take care of the supply. So it's not about people, it's about the materials more so than anything.
So y'all will get a piece of that pie?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So we had to put the monies out and then it will be reimbursed. A good question. Yes, sir.
And just to follow up on that, that is one-time funding. I wish I could say it would be reoccurring, but that would be a one-time funding that we will receive for that.
Do you understand that?
All right, so some positions that we know that we need in the district. These are positions that were cut with the recovery plan. These were positions that were frozen with the recovery plan. These are positions that we know based on our enrollment for next year, our preliminary enrollment figures. And then also, a result of COVID-19, we had to increase some of these as well. So as you can see, teaching positions, based on our student count, to keep our classroom sizes the same, we would need 4.5 teachers. That would be the $360,000. The special services teachers, we would need 4 of those. Again, that would be $320,000 that we need. Again, these are all just based on enrollment figures for next year. And then along with special service teachers, there's a requirement for paraprofessionals as well. That's a mandate, and that would be $146,000. Moving down to the nurses, we all know that with COVID-19, there's a significant need for our nurses. We do not have nurses in every school, so this would provide additional nurses. We believe we need 8 of those. That would be $418,000. We would need additional guidance counselors. Those would be about 2 positions for $160,000. Then you get into some of the mental health professionals that we need, and interventionists. These are for the children, the services that we are unable to provide fully to the children right now. We believe we need 10 mental health professionals and 13 interventionists. You can see the dollar amount there, $615,000 and $823,000. Custodians. We had several positions cut in the recovery plan. I have 11 frozen positions right now, plus we need additional custodians to help with the cleanliness next year to keep our schools clean for the children so they are safe and healthy. We believe we need 41 of those positions. That's $1.7 million for the custodial staff. And then we need a media specialist. We have 1 position right now. That's a mandated state position that we need to have. That's $80,000 for that position. You can see the total there comes up to $4.6 million. Those are needs that we have to have for our children and our schools.
What are special services teachers?
Those are the teachers, and the paraprofessionals are those that support students that receive special needs. They are students who've identified with IEPs or 504 plans. They need additional support in making sure we give them accommodations. So those are the teachers that meet the needs of
They
students.
make $8,000.
It actually depends on where they come in on the scale, but
That includes benefits, salaries and benefits combined. Benefits add up to 30.96% for benefits plus health insurance.
And so I think you were getting ready to go somewhere, and so I'm going to read your mind. When we talk about the nurses, Ms. Spearman has actually done research around our nurses and has actually had the discussion, and I don't know when it's going to occur, but there needs to be an increase in the salaries that our nurses receive. but today is just one step at a time, one day at a time. We haven't even put the nurses' salaries and the potential for those salaries. And this goes back to the question that was asked earlier in terms of the executive staff. If you can look at this diagram right here, there are no executive positions on the staff. This is about students. Now, these are the numbers that are in combination of a couple of things. The first thing is when we reduce positions, and I say we because I'm owning it as the superintendent, when we talk about positions that were reduced as a result of the recovery fund, it's slowly but surely trying to re-implement those positions because it did have an impact on the schools. The other thing that occurred is having conversations with our principals based on a need. We met with each one of our principals for them to come through with their needs. And, you know, as a superintendent, I can sit in my office, which I don't, and say what it is that they need, but it's most important that I have that dialogue with them for them to identify where their greatest needs are. And then the other piece is, these were the positions we were looking for before COVID, but again, looking at the custodial staff and making sure that the buildings are clean and that they are free from the virus, because if not, we're going to continue to reinfect our children in our community. So these, again, are needed positions, and as I stated earlier, as Mr. Baker presented, you can look, none of these positions are executive level positions, because I mean what I say, and I say what I mean, just being completely transparent. It has nothing to do with the executive level, it has everything to do with children.
Y'all gonna open up next year? School, I mean, are we gonna, is it gonna be regular school?
I got another question.
I don't know, I was just wondering.
So just to answer.
Have y'all
your
made
question-
that decision?
No, sir, we have not.
Okay.
So where we are, it's one of the things that we've done, again, those of you who've been around me, I'm already there. We have created several scenarios based on research and what other schools have done around the world. And we've compiled a list of scenarios, and we've had the dialogue with principals, but I've also asked principals to have the conversations with teachers about what would be the best option for us regardless. And I can tell you that based on the feedback from the teachers, there's a fear of coming back to school face-to-face, but they know that meeting the needs of our children face-to-face is the best way to do it. So we're still having conversations, and we're waiting for the decision and the determination to come down to how we're going to open up. And when we do that, we'll be prepared to implement safely the ways in which we need to educate.
In all this, you think?
Yes.
Yes, Elizabeth, quick question. When Mary Matthews signed that leave package back in May, he froze step increases at current levels.
Temporarily, I believe, until they
Well,
reconvene.
until September.
Right.
Okay, so I'm actually coming to break, so unless Steve was talking about, we might have, be able to do it until September. You know what the state's going to do. They might extend that step frozen for the remaining years. I think that's what we're going to do. I can't speak for the legislature. I'll make sure you understood that that was already frozen.
We know that 4.6 million is a large number, so what we've worked through is allocating that over a 3-year period. How can we get all those positions in that we need? We took the total cost divided by 3. It averages to about 1.5 million each year. And so we've allocated those positions based on needs, what we would need. So we're saying 29 positions for next year, 26 positions for fiscal year 2022, and 32.5 positions for fiscal year 2023.
So as you can see, we presented to you, again, the needs of the district. Can I put a millage on that? I can't. All I'm asking is for your support by any means that you possibly can to support us financially as we continue to meet the needs of our children. So there is no magical millage from my perspective. You see the numbers, you see the need, you see the direction in which we're trying to go, and I can only communicate that to you and model that for you because our children are our most prized possession. And as we began the school year, our theme for this year is much more relevant now than it was at the beginning of the year. Together, Sumter, every school, every student, and every day. And so we have to begin to minimize those gaps that exist in terms of the learning for our children, regardless as to the zip code or the communities in which they live. But as you can see from the presentation, there is nothing in there that talks about executive level leadership. It all is about our schools and our people. And It's about investing in our people, which ultimately filters through in our children and making sure we educate them to the highest levels possible. So I thank you for the questions, I thank you for your attention, and I thank you for your continued support.
Thank you.
Is there a bleach wipe so I can wipe this down, because I did touch it, the teacher in me wants me to.
I want to thank Dr. Martin Knox and Ms. Miller for that presentation. It was very enlightening. I guess at this point we're going to take it into consideration, right? It's been very thorough. That last slide,
The last
oh, that's
slide.
ours. So what you were asking for next year is 29 positions?
Yes, sir.
Whatever means necessary.
Yes, sir. And if I may add, I know my presentation's over, but we aren't coming in here and asking for the mansion to be built overnight. I know that's not possible, and I know there are other factors that play into the decision that you have because it impacts our community as a whole. So instead of asking for the whole mansion, we just ask for the foundation to begin to be built.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Chairman, I do have one just quick question. Let's say council says, well, this might be a good way to do a 3-year program and try to figure this thing out. I guess the only concern I would have at that point is y'all come back next year and you say, well, I need more than what we had set up here would be my concern. Doing it, and I think that I like the idea of doing it over 3 years, a lot better than I do all at once too. But that would just be a small concern I would have. Something else may happen when you're in trouble again. Thank you, there.
Okay, Mr. Mason.
Mr. Chair, council members, we will now spend just about an hour going through a recap and the proposal for second reading tonight for the county's general fund budget. I think there's been some,
Thank you.
started, I know the clerk had to step out for a second to make some additional copies, but there's some slides we want to put up on the screen. I know you have a copy, hard copy of it, so it's okay, we'll go ahead and get started. You have in your packet, first the recap, general fund recap. Draw your attention to the May 26th version for first reading. We offered up a revenue budget of $50,581,084 and an expenditure request of $50,742,592 for a deficit of $161,508. Again, that was proposed at our last meeting on May 26th. That was approved for first reading. What we're presenting tonight for second reading is a budget request of revenue of $51,059,854, balanced out with the same amount of expenditures for a balanced budget. What we'll do over the next few minutes is kind of go through some of the details. It's going to be part, it's going to be a recap of what we already done and also some changes that we are proposing. First, I want to start with the expenditures, if we could. In this new budget proposal, we do have a 2% COLA built in for all county employees. That equates to about $517,000 in new expenses. A wage study, we do have that built in as proposed by the wage study we did last month, presented by FP Find Good People. That equates to an additional $522,000. In that wage study, we had 85 sheriff deputies that would be adjusted. We have 48 detention officers that would be adjusted and 23 other positions for a total of 156 employees that would be adjusted built into this budget. We also have other department operating expenses that have been adjusted since our last meeting, but they're smaller. We won't get into that detail. But that's basically based on historical trends and factoring in the main part of the year. So the total proposed budget, again, for expenses is $51,059,854. Pretty significant changes from our last conversation. And of course, the expenses have gone up, so the revenues needed to go up equally. So we've worked through a process that we're going to discuss with council tonight. We have built in for the local government fund the 5%. That's based on the formula. The news that we're hearing from the state is that while they are not going to receive the anticipated revenue that they originally projected, it's still going to be above the 5% margin. So therefore, we're factoring in the 5% formula margin, which would be $217,000. We're also proposing tonight, based on conversations we've had with individual council members, an adjustment in our infrastructure fund. I think, Gary, you have a copy of that draft. You have it in your packet. I'll spend just a few minutes talking about that. Here it is. Thank you. So the infrastructure fund is the 20% that we actually take off the top on our multi-county park BMU structure tax system. The average cash balance over the past 8 years is $2.8 million. That's that solid brown line that you see in the graph there. The 20% has been generating about $1.6 million annually. Reoccurring costs that we have built in to that $1.6 million, we spend about $500,000 annually for the operations, or our portion of the operations for the Economic Development Department. We also spend an additional $100,000 annually at our airport operations. So those are built in reoccurring annual costs. So if you take that off, that leaves about $1 million each year that's been going back to the fund balance. If we change that formula, right now I said it's at 20%, if we change that formula, that would generate an additional $400,000,
No, 20% to the 17% is about 200.
That's okay, 50%. Yeah, so we're changing, what we would propose to do is to change the formula from 20% to 17%. and that would free up 200.
It's a little over 200,000.
216, yeah, probably $216,000. So that's one of the things we propose to do to generate additional dollars for the county. Those months that you see that are above that brown mark, brown line, generally that's one-time funds that come from Commerce or Santee Cooper or Power Team or Black River for projects. So when we get approved project, we usually get grant funds, if you want to call it that, from the state. So that goes in that fund, drives the cost or drives that fund stream up. But then you'll see the expenditures bring it back down, which is what it's doing right now. You see the big difference in between the last two columns, the blue and the brown. That's because of the spec bill. We have additional costs coming in for that, and we have additional expenses associated with the spec bill. So what you see there is a balance, a current balance of 2.3, I think.
If we were to sell the spec building, hopefully, and get our money back, then we want that brown line back up.
That's right. That's right. So, and that is what we anticipate doing with the spec building, unless we get the right project, we might not do that. But I also remind council that we do have a loan out for that, about $2 million from Santee Cooper. We have another couple of years before we make our first payment on that. The interest is little to nothing on that. So we fully anticipate we'll have it sold by then and just pay off that loan and be done with it. But if not, we'll have the money in our fund reserve to pay for it. But it is structured in a payment program, we need to do it that way as well. We got options. So I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Let's see. Yeah, you can see the current balance is about $2.3 million. If we put it back to $6 million this year, then that'll push it back above the average market again. So that's what we propose to use the infrastructure fund, generate another couple of $100,000. Next slide, next graph would be the general fund balance.
I just wanted to thank you because that was something that I brought up. So thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you for the suggestion.
Absolutely.
We have really turned over every rock to make this work.
Good. That's what we have to do.
And you're right. And that leads me into this next conversation about our general fund, our reserve fund. Some of you know better about the reserve fund and our fund balance. The fund balance currently is $18,340,000. If you want to look at the bottom line, what I want you to draw your attention to is the bottom blue section, the light blue section. That is our policy position amount that the council has supported, that we keep 2 months of our operating expenses in our fund balance. So that's represented in the blue column there. That's approximately $8.7 million of the $18 million. We've also got committed funds, restricted funds, and other capital projects. That's going to be that tan, that gray, and that blue that you see in that last column. That fluctuates every year, but those funds are basically restricted, and we can't use that. What I really want you to focus on is the top column, that green section, which is what's available to us for use. That's the unrestricted funds in our fund balance. That amount equates to $4.7 million that's available to us. And what we propose to use this year to balance our budget is $275,000 of that. You've heard us talk many times that we're cautious about using that money, particularly on recurring costs, but we don't believe $275,000 would jeopardize us or put us in a bad position, seeing that we've got $1.7 million available to us. But also something we do use carefully when we're using it to balance this budget as we move forward.
Great information, and thanks again.
That's right. Thank you. Also built into this budget to balance is a 1.5 mil increase. I know we spoke 2.5 at one time, but we believe we can do 1.5 mils, which would generate another $432,000. One of the things that as we were working through this budget, that we realized is that there's going to have to be an adjustment to the loss, the local launch of sales tax credit. That's not really going to generate any money, additional money for us, but it is going to be an increase to the homeowners and the property owners. And that's something we are cognizant of. So we're proposing that the local option sales tax credit be adjusted, and based on information we just received yesterday or today, from Columbia today. It looks as though there will be a pretty fairly significant impact on local option sales tax or sales tax credit, roughly 15%. We're getting our numbers back from April now, April, May.
I just got April's today.
And it was a significant reduction, so we're trying to consider that. And as we know we're going to have to adjust that. We built in that adjustment, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, I think, later in the presentation. But all that plays into what the impacts to the citizens of Sumter County, and we're obviously cognizant of that. So those are the major changes that are in this budget to balance the budget. We'll move on to our next piece of information. So the next paper that we have here is the one with the blue county seal, and we want to talk about the revenues. So we're going to dig a little bit deeper now. We'll kind of give you the broad brush voice of this budget to balance it. To do it. So we talked about the broad brush, we talked about the big moving parts in our budget. Now I'm going to drill down a little bit more and kind of give you an idea of the numbers that we were working with. And I want to start with the page that's got blue seal with a little bit of graph at the bottom, and we're going to talk about the revenue changes specifically. So in the tax revenue stream, we've increased it by 1.5, almost $1.6 million. That comes primarily from the mill increase to 1.5 mills. Again, that's the just over $400,000. Our collection costs are up about $25,000. Our fee and lieu fees are up by about $200,000. The money we're redirecting again from the infrastructure that we just talked about, $216,000. And then the growth and the increase of the value of our tax, we talked about 1.5%. That's the number we've been using and verifying, so that's just over $428,000. So that's the total of the $1.5 million we're seeing increase. License and permits, they're up slightly, only about $35,000, but that's mostly your business license, building permits, and some other RD fees. Then in government, total increase is $420,000. The bulk of that is in the local government fund. That's where that will be located. That's $217,000. Voter registration funding, that's for the election year, $132,000. And DPREP, new revenue offsets in the treasurer's office, is roughly $100,000. Service revenue and charges, they've been actually decreased by about $131,000. The bulk of that is in our EMS charges. We've been working on that number now for a couple of years. Where we started out, we used to put years ago the actual charge that we put to the individual, but now we're starting to put what we're actually collecting. So that's a more realistic number for us. So there is a reduction there of about $250,000. We've also increased the detention center fees for house arrest, telephones, and commission. So there's some slight revenue increases there. Fines and forfeitures, they've been reduced by about $163,000, but that's all mostly associated with court fees, court fines, family court. The biggest being the fines of about $90,000. We base that on actual collection rates. I will go by this. This is getting a little bit more into the weeds. Miscellaneous was down by about $99,000. That's mostly damage reimbursement. That's a booking issue we got when we have a vehicle accident. We actually are putting that money and charging it over there as opposed to booking it over here, so we've got to reduce that. So total, then we've got Title 4D transfers increased by about $50,000. So you can see, and I know that's a lot of information that I just covered, but that's how close to detail we were looking at all of our revenue streams. And where we could adjust, we did. Where we could adjust, we would use those. Now we'll move to the expenditure page. You got a copy of that, and you can see they're broken up basically in 9 categories. Those 9 categories are what we use in our audit process. We started doing that a couple of years ago, looking at a lot of the different departments and agencies and categories, if you call them that. So in the general operating expenditures, It's increased by $968,000, almost $969,000. The biggest increase there was that property and casualty liability insurance we mentioned earlier. That's a $308,000 increase. We just got late in the process. The COLA and the wage studies built into that particular category, which is about $992,000. The assessor's office has an increase of about $41,000. That's because it's a reassessment year, so we've got additional expenses put in there. We mentioned the treasurer's revenue a little while ago. Here's the expense to match that. And other wage and fringe benefits for all the county built into that number as well. So that's the $968 in the general government administration, which is kind of a big category. If you drill down into the public safety section, you see there, and that amount represents an $821,000 increase. Most of that's going to be COLA and wage study. That's where those numbers are going to come in. That's roughly $741,000 or $821,000 in that area. Health and Human Services, that's basically E&S. So that's a total of $25,000. Then you've got and a lot of COLA, of course, every employee there is built into that increase as well. Environmental housing is another category. It's been decreased by just $20,000. Recreation is up by $90,000, but that's because of the COLA for those employees. That's the bulk of it. Transportation, public utilities, all small increases, most associated with the COLA adjustment. So that's kind of a quick brush of all the expenditures that we've had to adjust. Bulk of that, of course, associated with wages, took the 2% COLA being the biggest impact. Okay, the next piece of paper that you have should talk about other agencies. That's the same as we last discussed. There's been no adjustments on that. Just want to remind you. Other funds, they're the same. Do want to remind you that we have proposed in this year's budget an increase in fire district millage as well, which is about $46,000 total countywide, but that's an increase allowed by the one-year cap, about 2.11 million, I believe. Moving the fire district 28.9 mils to 29.5. And fire district 2 from 17.3 to 17.6, generating about $46,000. Okay. Also want to mention the solid waste tipping fee. As you recall, Waste Management has the ability in their contract to go up 3% each year. And what we're trying to do is to raise the tipping fee to account for that amount. So we're proposing to increase the tipping fee from $44.51 per ton to $46.62 per ton. Again, that's a direct relation to what's going on with the contract with Waste Management. Later tonight in the administrator's report, I'll show you some information that's been provided to me by Public Works showing what this COVID activity has actually done to our waste disposal system for the county. It's been a significant impact, so we'll show you that later on. But anyway, so let me be aware of that. And the last item, of course, we need to cover is the capital request. That's not changed from our last discussion. The only thing that has changed is that we do have the $3.5 million that's proposed for the bond tonight. That'll be on the regular agenda for second reading. We have the solid waste fund balance that's going to be building, so that's another $250,000 was purchased there. The general fund, we're using $250,000 out of our general fund, and our road user fee, we use $448,000 for some equipment for them. The total capital request would be $4,448,207. Again, $3.5 million out of our bond, and then the balance paid up out of those other funds.
There's still 15 months.
That's what the $10 million.
approve it.
Okay. So to conclude, I want to remind council what we're discussing tonight for our second reading is a balanced budget with the 2% COLA, with the wage study, with those adjustments to our revenue stream to balance it out at $51,059,854. A lot of information, don't do a lot of it really quick. But if you have any questions, Jessica, let's go. A lot of work. I want to thank Senator Reeves for her work in this. And of course, to continue support and cooperation of our staff to put all this together. We tried our best to listen to our council members, try to address your issues and concerns. You know, one of the things that we really wrestled with through this whole process is trying to get that goal in there, making that kind of time to figure out some of it. Ms. McGee, you gave us some very good input. I appreciate that. So these funding streams. It's a tight budget, but it's a budget I think we can reach. We don't know. We've heard of school district. There are some unknowns still. We're doing our best to project what those unknowns might be and build a budget around that. Don't know that we'll have to do a mid-year adjustment, but it's something we're going to be following very closely. And if we see the numbers not coming in like we anticipated, certainly we have at least the ability to come back and have that conversation with council and make that adjustment. But right now, we believe this is a good budget. We need to work with you. It counts for the major things we're trying to accomplish this year. That's all I wrote down.
Question.
Yes, sir.
I want to thank you and the staff for putting all this together. I'm really appreciative of the fact that we're giving 2% COLA to the other county employees. However, I wonder if that 2% is keeping up with the inflation. Because of course the goods and services are going up. And will that 2%, which is a cost of living, to adjust for the inflation, is that enough? I don't know, because I don't know the inflation rate that's taking place. But we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. So we're asking about 2/3 of our county employees to sacrifice for another third. And I'm not saying the other third, we know we're talking about it, not to talk about, but they entitled, they deserve it. And I agree with that, they deserve it. But I didn't expect it to be at the expense of 2/3 of our county employees. Because we're giving them a 2% instead of the standard 3% that we've always given just about every year. I'm looking at it when you said we have unassigned balance money of $4.7 million, and we're going to take some of that for one area, and I'm wondering if there's money in there to take to add another 1% to the other county employees, if we can consider that. I'm looking at the morale of our other county employees and the fact that how many of them are making under $30,000. I would like to see that. I would like to see how many of our county employees, the ones that are not getting that extra money, and only getting 2%, how many of them are making under $30,000? And I guarantee you, I bet you there's a lot. So while we are looking to upgrade one portion of our county staff employees, we're hurting others. The other option I might be willing to consider is that next year that we look at those people separately who didn't get the 3 only got to choose and give them a 4% cost of living next year, that they can catch up, because once you get behind, it's hard to catch up. So those are my concerns about the other employees and their morale. And the fact that I know a lot of them will not make it as much as the people you raise their salaries for. So thank you for that opportunity to talk, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Nixon, as if I recall, at one of our prior meetings when we were trying to figure out how much COLA we were going to be able to get to the employees, and it pretty much came out that we would not be able to do the full 3% right now. But wasn't there some discussion about, depending on what we get from the state as far as the local government fund, looking back and giving an additional 1%?
Yes, so that was, and thank you for bringing that up. That was a conversation that we were having very early on, but as you can see, we already built that money into our budget. That's what allowed us to get to the 2%. So that money's basically already been accounted for in this budget process. There was some conversation that we did nothing and then waited for the state to kick in, then maybe we could do a percentage, and it would equal about 1%. But since we've already built in what we think is going to be the max, I wouldn't feel comfortable with that at this point.
Any other questions or comments?
Just a quick one, reassessment here. If y'all look over the past 5 years, back and back and back, what does that generate? It adds revenue, I'm sure.
Yeah, and that's.
I'm just curious as what, every 5 years, that reassessment, how does it?
Well, the way I understand it, Council Baker, is it's more of a riding of the ship than it is getting additional revenue. So, for example, if you're 161 meals in the taxes generating roughly $12.6 million now. So now you would change that, instead of maybe it's 158 meals equal the same 12.6. You really don't gain any money, you just change your number of meals to accommodate for the dollars. That's the way I understand reassessment.
It will increase the meal value.
Right, increases meal value, but not the number.
And then you roll back. So basically a wash.
That's what's basically a wash.
The state law says you have to.
We have to. There's a little percentage that they allow you to keep. It's a small percentage, so you don't have to make any adjustments. But I think we may exceed that, so we'll have to make an adjustment. We have additional expenses built into this budget because we know that's going to be some additional operational costs, but no revenue. Anything else? Again, this is up for second reading tonight. It is the public hearing. What we try to do traditionally is bring you as close to a finished product by second reading. Obviously, there's an opportunity to tweak it if need be by third reading. But I think we've got a pretty tight budget here, and based on comments tonight, I wouldn't anticipate any significant changes between now and third reading. But you'll have the bond ordinance on the regular agenda tonight, and you'll also have the budget ordinance tonight for second reading.
Anyone else?
Just like to reiterate, the final amount that you have in the budget right now for the requested amounts from the sheriff's office. Where are we with that?
We're still at $38,000 for the entry level. I think we have that sheet, doing this from memory, but it's $38,000, and I believe it goes up to the lieutenant rank, so that it's a trickle effect. Each one will be moved through that process. And there's 48, I believe, in the detention center, and it starts at the beginning and goes up to all the sergeants. That's what the wage study showed what the deficiency were, and that's what we're programming to fund.
And some conversation has that been shared with the sheriff.
He's aware of all those programs.
And those who he's in agreement with, is that consistent with what he requested?
I can't honestly say that. I don't know that we've seen anything beyond what the entry 38. And then there was some discussion about some other positions that we be working with. And I think the study provided for, personally, I think the study may have provided for more. conversation I had with the sheriff, and see if he's comfortable before we move to third reading.
Yeah, in courtesy, he really needs to be included, out of courtesy.
We'll do that. Yes.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion, second, that we adjourn.
Thank you. We have a little while, 45 minutes.
That feature right around the one that's short. I should say, you feel better than you. Yeah, if they want to share, all of us can share. Not bad. There's their decision to go up and vote. Go for it. And then they want to go high and all these contracts. They don't agree to, which they didn't have to do. Then he said, well, I'm perfect my home, all of my. So, 615 months old. I'm volunteer.
This is a perfect venue for that. Tonight.
Right.
Home back
I
up.
talked to Mr. Eugene. I talked to him about everything, he told me that I could be here for that.
So that's why we came. We didn't
So I
know.
didn't know, so I'll call him, set up an appointment. Let him know what's going on, because everybody that I talked to said, you seriously, y'all sharing?
Volunteers?
Every volunteer. Every volunteer is something
And
else.
except for the one that's full time, they sat there only, so they leave their station, say, when they need it,
Well, it's the same one, the people like that's just the moving, and that's going to be different. I couldn't, and I just kind of, I haven't looked at all of it. I was as quickly as possible, but we can get the hotel room. If you find the Tim, you can get the hotel room. And I'm assuming it's You will not?
I will.
Okay. Okay. I'll just do that.
It's 6 o'clock. I'd like to call
being the one in whom we live and move and have our being. We thank you for being our ultimate provider. We thank you that as we are going through this budget season, that you are helping us by helping us to make those ends meet. And we ask you to help us to continue to be good stewards of that which you blessed us with. And now as we go through this meeting, we ask you to give us guidance, help us to have understanding and wisdom, that we will make the decisions that are pleasing in your sight. These and all blessings we ask in your name. Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Any additions or change to the agenda?
Move for approval, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded that we approve the agenda and discussion. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Have a motion to approve the minutes from our regular meeting of Tuesday, May 26th.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of approving our minutes? Please say aye. All opposed? Same. The minutes are approved. Okay, first item on the agenda is Little John Lane, ordinance number 2926. We will have second reading immediately after for public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, just to recap, Little John Lane is just a little less than a block long street that was never paved, never accepted into the county system for maintenance. Mr. Brian Simmons would like to own it since his house is at the end of it, and without that, he won't have frontage on the public to maintain the road. So I made contact with the people who also bought the property. You know, they don't front on the property, and each would like to use it, but they don't want any ownership of it. So what I'll do is give an easement deed to each of those other two, and then give a deed, a quick claim deed to Mr. Simmons. And so the easement deed will be recorded first, and the deed to Mr. Simmons will be recorded. That's the plan.
Mr. Jones, did you get from anyone that
No, sir. No, sir.
seeing none, move for second reading?
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded that we have second reading on ordinance number 2926. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of second reading?
Aye.
All opposed? Second reading is approved. Ordinance number 2927. This is our general obligation bond. Mr. Nixon?
Mr. Chair, council members, good evening again. This is our capital bond request for our budget ordinance. This is a $3.5 million. I'll just highlight some of the larger items in there. We have 12 light packs for our EMS trucks for $519,000. We have an ambulance, one new ambulance building for $135,000. We have 18 vehicles for the sheriff's department and equipment. That totals just over $568 for the vehicles and another $150 for the equipment to go in. We have a trash compactor in the budget, but it's not part of the 3.5 that will be funded primarily out of the solid waste. So we also have 40 radios for the detention center at $171,000. There's other improvements at the detention center, capital improvements to the building of $170,000. We also have $406,000 in there for sheriff radio software upgrade to be compliant with the dispatch. But those are the major items. There are a couple other small items in there as well. That equates to the $3.5 million. It equates to our 15 meal capacity for our bonds. So that's it.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Nixon? Anyone wishing to speak at the public hearing prior to vote? Seeing none?
Move for approval. Second.
Been moved properly seconded that we approve ordinance number 2927, which is the bond. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Chair. We have presented tonight for second reading through a budget workshop for council tonight with great detail, a balanced budget of $51,059,854. The major parts in that is a 2% COLA for all employees, the wage study adjustments as recommended, and a 1.5 mil increase. That's what's the current operating rate.
Questions, comments, from Mr. Mitchell? Seeing none from the public, hearing from the board. Have a motion to approve the budget ordinance.
Move for sure. Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Abstain, Mr. Chairman.
New business, resolution R 2004, I think it's the solar project, Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, this is an inducement resolution, just to say that we intend to go forward with negotiations after we will have an actual fee and real tax ordinance. But the terms that we're agreeing to in this resolution be a 6% fixed millage, and then a social revenue credit, so that in the final analysis, the project will pay $2,750 per megawatt, with anticipated generation being 74.9 megawatts. In the end, Sumter County would get a net fee tax payment of $205,975. So those generally the terms we'll put in the multi-county park and so forth. This is a resolution requires one vote. We'll continue negotiations with the project and then come back with the DMO tax portions.
Could we send a revised proposal back to them, which I understand they will accept?
That's my understanding, yes, sir. They originally offered $2,000 per megawatt for this. And it says it'll be $2,750 per megawatt. That's a $750 per megawatt increase.
How long is the minute lock?
It's a 30-year deal.
When does the minute start? Which minute will they use? 21s? 20s?
Will be the lowest possible millage if the year that they put their project into service for the prior year. But the other analysis of this is special source of revenue credit is going to adjust annually so that in the end it will pay $2,750 per megawatt.
Any other questions, Mr. Brown?
I thought they weren't comfortable with 30 years. I thought they were. That's what I thought. Did I not hear that?
This says 30 years.
We gave them our terms, which was
I'm fine, no.
in the 30 years, and they can't have any accepted.
I just thought 30 years was something that had been discussed. I don't know.
Well, they accepted it, so that's the bottom line.
I'm good with
Any other questions or comments?
that. I'm looking for
Have a second?
second.
It's been moved and properly seconded that we have our reading on R 2004. All in favor? All opposed? The emergency ordinance number 2929, Mr. Brown.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, we've been asked to suspend door-to-door sales due to the COVID pandemic. So this is an emergency ordinance to suspend door-to-door sales in the county for 60 days, 60 days from today. And that's the purpose of this ordinance.
Where did this request originate?
Originated from the director of the business license office. But you know, one of the
Complaints or something?
just concerned about people coming from out of town, going door to door, and possibly spreading coronavirus to unsuspecting citizens who were not expecting people to come to their door. So this is It's the nature of door-to-door sales, it's a cold call, as you know. There's no appointment, so there's just concern for the citizens of the county who are limited exposure to possible exposure out of towners coming in for door-to-door sales.
Did the city adopt this as well?
The city did, in fact, I used their ordinance to temper for hours.
So what this will do is they won't issue any permits.
Right.
Those,
We call them identification cards.
You're supposed to get one of those when you come to town. And if we find out you don't, then we can just violate it.
was this ever a part of the governor's, I'm not aware.
We're trying to reopen that, I'm not trying to move it down. I think it's a little late.
Mr. Chairman, Ken, I'll just add to it. One of the things I was saying, just because the city does something doesn't mean we have to do it. One of the things we are concerned with is, as you know, the city limits is not directly a perfect circle or a perfect line. You'll have one house that's in the city, and the next have two houses in the county, and another house in the city. So if it's not consistent, then obviously the person's going to go from door to door and truthfully not know, because they don't go. They just line up in their neighborhood, and they work that neighborhood, so they will hit both of them. So if we allow permits in the county and the city already not issuing those permits, it could create some enforcement issues and possibly some issues with our citizens.
Well, I'm just wondering, how many of those permits did we issue? I don't think it's that many, is it?
I honestly don't know.
I'd be surprised if it's, now, I don't know why we're doing it.
If it's a few number, obviously it's not going to impact
Yeah.
a whole bunch, and we're impacting a whole lot of others.
I'd
But again, most of these folks are not from our area, they're coming from.
It seems like if we do it, we're mainly doing it for the city, because that's what.
Well, we got a lot of,
Majority.
we got, it is a majority, but we do have a lot of subdivisions now that are in the
Yeah,
county.
they will hit the subdivision.
They do line up on those subdivisions that are in the county.
City and home, no one ever had anybody come in.
I have them come to my house.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
What we said, room?
I usually don't let her get into the presentations. Sorry, I should say it.
I had one Thursday. I had one come to my house last Thursday.
We had it back.
I wouldn't open the door.
We had it back.
You have that?
We got it through.
All right, any other questions?
Do we have to do it 60 days?
City did it for 60.
But theirs was started last Tuesday, right? That's correct, last Tuesday, so. You could change it from here to theirs and expire over theirs, whatever many days that is, so. If you do it that way.
Yeah.
Instead of just 60 days, you can shorten it by that amount of days. 53 days.
Like Jimmy, I mean, we're trying to get things opened up again. I mean, if they're letting people go out to restaurants and drink back to church, I don't know why you're saying you don't want these people. Yeah, I mean.
But I can see where the argument that we are, be consistent with the city in this situation.
And I can.
It's just gonna be confusing.
And we still have our numbers climbing. Number of cases. It's not.
I don't think this is gonna stay, I think there's a lot of other stuff going on.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of reasons for that.
But I'd be willing to go with this, I just hate to do it for 60 days. Try it out for 30 days, see how things are going.
And then if you go to 30, then the city's still in it for approximately 15 more, or, you know what I'm saying? Then you get back to the same issue.
Really ain't talking 45 days.
I do agree with you, part about being consistent with the city. That's just gonna be confusing. Yeah, when they come down there, they're more than likely not gonna come in the office, ask for a county permit, they're gonna ask for a city permit.
Unless they target, and some do that, target certain subdivisions. with their effort in some of those subdivisions in the county. Could be.
Well, I'll make a motion that we do it, just to, you know, the cities.
I'll second that.
Okay, so moving properly, second, got to pass it. And go along with what the city is doing, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Yeah. Mr. Bryan, can you adjust it so that it mirrors the time left with the city, since the city started last week, instead of saying 60 days, whatever time is left?
The way this is worded, it would expire on the 61st day after the effective date. So that'd be 61 by 754. Is that the rule of council?
Charlie. No, what I'm saying is.
When does the cities expire? We want it to expire
Just on that date.
That's 45 days and we 45, whatever.
Well, theirs expires 60 days after last Tuesday, like a week ago. So 7 days, 61 by 754. Is that what you want to do?
Yes.
So you can make, so it expires on the 54th day after the effective date. You may start more.
Okay, come on to the committee report. Mr. Nixon, you want to go?
The Chair, we've already gone through the budget workshop, I think, in great detail, but good exchange of information. I think we tried to cover everything that the council's asked for. That is second reading, so any changes, we do have a couple more weeks for third reading, but I think it's pretty tight and accurate.
Did you not say you had a slide that you wanted to show?
That's in the next administrative report.
All right. Report from council members on meetings, trainings, and other conferences.
I don't have a thorough report, but there's some information that I will be forwarding to Madam Clerk so that she can include it in the information that she usually places in our packet. And it's simply from the Santee Lynch's Regional Council of Government. They are doing a lot of really unique things. They have an opportunity where they're offering their personal protective equipment at a really reasonable cost to entities that really need those things, and then there are a lot of other information that is really pertinent to the general public, and I'll pass those on to you, Ms. Brenda, if you will put it in our information and whatever other medium you have. And that's my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Lee.
Sure.
Anyone else? Monthly reports,
Mr. Chairman, I have this one item, and I've already given that to you all, information about the annual conference for SCAC, which has been reduced severely. But nonetheless, there are some classes that some of you need to be in it. But that's it. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have on the screen for you some information that was shared with me from Public Works, and our screen isn't available. I mentioned, I think, at the last meeting that what we've noticed is a tremendous upswing in our waste disposal system. And what's provided to you there for Public Works are some numbers. The star, the red star on the left in the graph, the convenience center cost. If you look at that's when the actual COVID situation was actually presented. So that was late February, early March. We started seeing it was already running a little bit higher, as you can see, for the year. But when that kicked in, it really jumped all the way through April. It has started coming down a little bit in April, but it's still much higher than our normal costs associated. So that's every time they have to make a pull, every time a bin fills up, we have to pull, we get charged by Waste Management for that pull, take it out to the landfill, and it's by weight, so they measure, so you can see the cost is actually increased. And a lot of that we contribute to. People have a lot of free time now. They're taking advantage of this opportunity maybe to clean up their yards, clean up around their house. They may even be doing some construction stuff, and so they're taking possibly some of the funds that they receive to do some home improvements, which is all good. But at the end of the day, there are significant costs to us. Is that the second graph? Vehicles at the landfill. I think it was the second. Go up. Go up. Yeah, there you go. C&D landfill tonnage. So that's the actual weight that's showing up at the landfill itself. Again, you can look at the numbers and see that it started making that climb right about when the COVID-19 impact, and it continues to decline even today. It's significantly higher. Has not made that turn down like the previous slide. So that's actually what's actually showing up at our landfill. The number of tons. Of course, there's a cost associated with all that as well. The last column, the last graph is the vehicles at the landfill. That's kind of tracking the traffic flow at the landfill. They do car counts. So you can see in March 19th, the stay-at-home order by the governor with the red star, and then lifted the stay-at-home. Seemed to be whenever the downturn, the yellow star. So you can see the vehicle traffic. That's a good indication again of the amount of waste that's actually being.
But they want to stay at home.
That's right. So they stayed at home as long as they could, and they had to get away. Figured the landfill was a good spot. I'm sorry, y'all. It's been a long day. Not working order anymore. But anyway, yeah, you can see it. We just want to share this. We track all this information. We certainly expect there will be an uptick in our costs this year.
Back to the first slide at the top. Don't you think that will level off and maybe even go down below?
You would think that once people get all this stuff cleaned out, it's like any other, it's like a flow system. Once you get it flushed through, it seems like it would trickle back down to very low. We haven't seen that yet. That's right, that's right. Or people got in the habit now saying it looks pretty good, I'm going to start keeping this thing up. You don't know. But yeah, we were thinking along the same, there's only so much in the waste stream, and if you get a large influx of it, then hopefully the back end will reduce. So maybe this year we would see a downside. But some of those charts you can see it hasn't really made a turn. So something we'll be observing over the next couple months and keep you abreast of it.
Did you look at it for the years before? Because I would imagine every spring it's an
It
increase.
is. It is, and that's what the
They
green
get the
chart.
spring fever, want to clean the yard.
And that's what the green chart just shows last year when they look past you. Every spring it pops up, it kind of follows a little bit of a gradual trend, but this one just spiked on us. But that's a good question, good observation. Thank you, sir. So,
Comment section has been suspended until further notice by council.
Move for adjournment. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.